Welcome everybody. Brendan Gould's my name from the Master Plumbers, and I'll be with you tonight hosting this 2021 gas safety webinar, Your Clients, Your Responsibilities. Firstly, I'd like to thank everybody for spending some time with us this evening, and also to thank both Energy Safe Victoria and the Victorian Building Authority in relation to their sponsorship and support for these webinars. Now, we've been working with both ESV and the VBA for approximately 10 years, doing sessions like this around the state, face-to-face sessions discussing issues around carbon monoxide awareness, gas safety, and updating plumbers that are out there doing both gas installation work and Type A service work. Unfortunately, with COVID and the situation we've seen ourselves in over the last sort of 18 months or so, we've chosen to do the delivery this way on the webinar. So again, just like to thank everybody for their time tonight, and thank both Energy Safe Victoria and the VBA. So before we get moving to the main part of the webinar, what I'd like to do is I'm going to pass over to Marnie Williams, who's the Chair and Commissioner with Energy Safe Victoria, just to say a few words. And then what I'll do is we'll get under the sort of formal proceedings around the session itself.
Hi, I'm Marnie Williams, Commissioner and Chair of Energy Safe Victoria. I'd like to welcome you all to the 2021 Gas Safety Webinars, Your Clients, Your Responsibilities. I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which we meet today and pay my respects to their elders past and present. I extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people at our webinar today. We are once again proud to present this important gas industry webinar series alongside our partner organisations, the Victorian Building Authority and Master Plumbers. This series is focused on clients and your responsibilities. As service providers, the safety of your clients must always be at the top of your mind. Tonight, the team will discuss the suite of materials available to you and practices to ensure your clients are safe in their homes using gas. We will also look at Victoria's new rental laws, which came into effect at the end of March, including the requirement for gas safety checks to be conducted. And to assist you in understanding the changes and new requirements, ESV and the VBA have developed some frequently asked questions. At the end of tonight's webinar, I encourage you all to engage with our expert panel to ensure you understand what is required and clarify any details. I also want to take this opportunity to update you on some significant changes at ESV. Through the governance of the Commission and the leadership of our new CEO, Leanne Hewson, we are transforming ESV into a stronger, safety-first, data-driven and customer-focused safety regulator. Finally, I acknowledge the important role Type A gas fitters play in keeping the Victorian community safe in their homes. I do hope you find the webinar informative and it helps you deliver safe outcomes for your clients. Thanks for attending tonight.
So again, just to go over a couple of those points that Marnie raised in that introduction as to what we'll be looking at tonight. So we will be looking at the suite of online resources that are available on both ESV and the VBA websites, looking at the obligations that gas fitters and Type A appliance servicing plumbers have under the Gas Safety Act. We'll also look at occupational registration and licensing requirements, looking at when we carry out gas fitting work, compliance certificate requirements as part of that, discussing the new gas safety check under the Residential Tenancies Regulations of 2021, and what it looks like to do a complete service on a Type A gas appliance. Now, if you have been part of these sessions that we've done in the past, a lot of the information that we provided was very much in the line of how to do things. Tonight's session, in relation to the time that we have available, a lot of the discussions we'll have is about where you can find the appropriate information to just make life a little bit easier for you if you are undertaking both installation work and Type A service work, plus also information around the new gas safety check under the Residential Tenancies Act. So tonight, again, Marnie mentioned we have a panel. So we've got Paul Harris, Head of Gas Operations with ESV, Enzo Alfonsetti, who's the Head of Gas Appliance and Component Safety, Matt Wilson, a Senior Technical Advisor with the VBA, and Adam Falconer, who's team leader of compliance and audit with the VBA. On the bottom of your screen, you should see that there's a Q&A tab. If you would like to ask a question while we're going through the session, please just type in your question. What will happen, Gary Barth, who's the senior technical advisor here with the Master Plumbers, Gary will push the questions to the panel. We will hopefully answer as many questions as possible as we go through tonight's session. And also at the end of the slides and my presentation, we'll open up to the panel to come online, and Gary will be asking some of the questions that have come up more regularly for tonight's session and talk through those answers. Now, if for some reason your question isn't answered tonight, we'll certainly get to you over the next couple of days with an answer to your question, making sure that everyone's question is asked. If not live, it'll be answered over the next couple of days. So as we get into the presentation, so firstly, what I'd like to do is just talk about both Energy Safe and the VBA's websites, if you're not familiar with them. Most of the information that we'll see and we'll talk about tonight comes out of Energy Safe Victoria's websites. Now, I've just got a screenshot of the front page of the website itself, just highlighted the technical information tab. That's where we'll find all of the information that we'll talk through tonight, information around the gas safety sheets, information around frequently asked and answered questions. Also, there's the videos that the ESV has developed over the last couple of years. So if you click onto that tab, what you'll certainly see is a drop-down menu. That drop-down menu sort of highlights a couple of points here. One is the Type A Appliance Gasfitter Toolkit. That's around servicing of Type A gas appliances. Also, a new web page that's been developed by ESV is the Gasfitter Toolkit. Now, that is in relation to the gas safety check under the residential tenancies regulations that have come into play as of March of 2021. There's also another little bit of information here around the gas technical information sheets that ESV have been developing over the last sort of a number of years, again, just to try to make life a little bit easier for those that are working in the industry in relation to doing gas fitting and Type A service work. VBA's website, so on the VBA website, again, just a screenshot of the homepage here. Up on the tab at the top there, we've got the plumbing industry. If you drop into that, you will find again some information that's pertinent to tonight's session, information around carbon monoxide safety. There's safety videos in relation to how you undertake the negative pressure test, also the carbon monoxide spillage test, information around registration and licensing requirements. So there's a lot of information there that if you're not familiar with these web pages, part of tonight's session is to just try to make you a little bit more familiar and point you in the right direction if you are looking for information around gas fitting and gas fitting safety. So what we'll do is we'll sort of move straight in. Last year, ESV launched this Type A Appliance Gasfitter Toolkit webpage. So I'm just going to jump into the website itself. So if we have a look at the Type A Gasfitter Toolkit page, there's a little bit of information there. And again, I just want to highlight at the moment, for those people that might not be aware, ESV are promoting the Be Sure campaign, and that is a forward-facing campaign, trying to make consumers more aware of what it is and what it means to get a Type A appliance serviced. ESV, VBA and the Master Plumbers certainly do support the idea of gas appliances being serviced every 2 years. We do want to make sure that consumers become more aware of that, and that is to make sure that people, when they do get someone into their property to service Type A appliances, and especially open flute appliances, that they are going to get a full and thorough service of the appliance itself. So that you'll see campaigns on the television and in the print media around what that means. So a couple of things here too to just be mindful of. There certainly is some information around COVID and what we need to do to make sure we're keeping ourselves safe if we are working in properties, and unfortunately there might be a potential of someone being positive to COVID, and what we should be doing to not only protect ourselves but also protect the people that we might be working for. But the main crux of what this webpage is about is information around people that are undertaking Type A appliance service work. So one of the things that's been really important over the last couple of years is that people have had the opportunity to ask questions, and those questions have been certainly answered. In the FAQ section of the web page itself, what there is that there's a couple of pages set up from the previous webinars where people have been asking questions, where there is information around things that might make life a little bit easier if you are undertaking work and you might have a query about what you should do in a particular situation. So if we have a look here, there's information around heat exchangers, isolation of dangerous gas installations, talking about conducting carbon monoxide tests on Type A appliances. You know, there's a whole range of information here. 5 pages of good information. There's information around what it means if you are someone that is licensed to carry out the work or endorsed to carry out the work. So again, this is information that is readily updated. So please, if you're not familiar and you've got some questions, do have a look at it. If for some reason your question isn't answered, please do contact our ESV or the VBA, and they'll certainly be able to help you in that space. So other information that's important that's housed on the website itself is information around, and I'm not going to jump into every sheet. Unfortunately, we just don't have the time to do that tonight, but there's information around carbon monoxide testing equipment. Again, that's to highlight that we do need to make sure that our analyzers are being calibrated every 12 months. There's information around what we need to make sure of that we are, again, following manufacturer instruction in relation to the use of those analyzers, understanding that there has been some issues in the past where handheld analyzers that have been put too close to the heat stream of an appliance can sometimes be damaged. And after they are damaged, they potentially can offer a false reading in relation to carbon monoxide. So there's some information there just to highlight, the delicacy of the analyzers that we're using, and just to ensure that they are being used appropriately. There's also information around some WHS, some occupational health and safety information, making sure that if you are doing a lot of service work, that you are protecting yourself in relation to any exposure that you might find yourself being confronted with in relation to carbon monoxide. So Safe Work Australia, their guidelines there is that we shouldn't be, there shouldn't be an accumulated figure of more than 30 parts per million over an 8-hour day if we are being exposed to carbon monoxide. It talks about how we can accurately measure that figure if you're doing multiple services and unfortunately you are exposed to carbon monoxide. So there's good information there. And there is also the information around the technical sheets that we will look at tonight around obligations under the Gas Safety Act, looking at ventilation and quality of air for appliances, how we carry out a complete service of an appliance itself. Plus, there's also some information around the ESV negative pressure animation. And again, if people haven't seen that, it was launched last year. We showed it in the videos and the animations last year. We're not going to show it tonight, but please, if you haven't seen it, do jump in and have a look. It does go and show you what how an open flue operates effectively, how negative pressure can disadvantage an appliance and draw products of combustion back into the space. Also, what it looks like to do a smoke test, and how you can overcome any negative pressure that might be present in the space as well. So there's a lot of good information. There's also some information around the ESV and the VBA co-branded letter, which you can provide to homeowners, tenants, or potentially managing agents around situations where you might have negative pressure present in a space. You might have an open flue appliance, but that appliance is not spilling carbon monoxide. So again, a lot of good information, and most of the information that we'll talk about does sit on this webpage on ESV's website. So the first thing that we're going to talk about really is the Gas Safety Act of 1997. So what that tells us, and if we are registered or licensed people in the field, is that it means that a person carrying out gas fitting work on an appliance or a gas installation, they must ensure that that appliance or gas installation does comply with the prescribed standard. So as we know from a gas fitting, I would like to think people know that we're talking about the AS 5601. Now that AS 5601, there's just been a public comment phase around that standard itself. That'll go through effectively some committees, and we will potentially see a new standard for the AS 5601 released in the not too distant future. We do need to make sure that the work that we're doing does certainly comply with that. From a gas installation point of view, if you are installing new appliances, that does include, as part of the commissioning process, negative pressure tests, carbon monoxide spillage tests, but very importantly, it also does include making sure that appliances are appropriately ventilated to ensure that the atmospheric burners will operate properly. We also do have the gas regulations of 2018, and the crux of that suggests that gas installations are not to be made unsafe during any gas fitting work, and also that the gas installation is safe for use on completion of that work. So our obligations as licensed or registered gas fitters, or people that are endorsed to carry out Type A appliance service work, sits within both these the Gas Safety Act of 1997 and the Gas Safety Regulations of 2018. So if we have a look at that in a little bit more detail, Gas Information Sheet 57, that is sitting on ESV's website. So we'll just have a little bit of a look, and I'll just highlight a couple of things, just I think that are important for us that are doing the work, so that we can understand that we do have obligations and we need to make sure and carry out work in a particular way. And I suppose the most important thing here is what I would suggest is that under those regulations in the Gas Safety Act, that as a licensed or registered person, we do need to maintain our competency in the trade. We do need to update knowledge, need to ensure that we're accessing the current standards and any technical notes that might go with that. And those notes are revised from time to time. So there's certainly been updates to the Gas Information Sheet 38 recently. There's been changes and amendments to the ASNZ 5601 as well, including sections around commissioning process, establishing baseline conditions for smoke testing, and undertaking negative pressure testing of appliances. So it is really important that we understand that and that we are fulfilling our obligation as we do that work as licensed and registered people. It also does suggest that we do need to ensure the safe operation of gas appliances and the service of those appliances as well. So again, I do thank everybody for spending some time with us tonight, and we'll be going over a little bit more of the information that has been highlighted to us at Master Plumbers from both ESV and VBA, and that way what we have seen out in the field, just to make sure people are fully aware of what we need to be looking for in these spaces. So that leads us to a question or a series of questions that have been raised in relation to who actually can carry out this type of work, and especially what's happening now in relation to some of the changes that we've seen since the update of the residential tenancies regulations and what's happening in that space. So if we look at the gas fitting the plumbing regulations of 2018, two distinct sections there, of course. One is around gas fitting work. So people that hold registration in gas fitting or license in gas fitting certainly can install, replace, construct, alter, repair, maintain, test, or commission any gas installation. So as part of the installation process of a Type A appliance, you need to test the appliance, you need to commission the appliance, again, including negative pressure and carbon monoxide spillage. But what that does not mean is that you cannot carry out Type A gas appliance servicing work if you only hold registration or license in gas fitting. And that does go right down to the point of changing a thermocouple on an appliance itself. Then what we can do is we can have a look at the Type A appliance servicing work. Now, Type A appliance servicing work is a specialised class of plumbing, an endorsed class that certainly does allow you to do the internal cleaning, maintenance and adjustment of any Type A appliance, and adjustment, repair and replacement of components of a Type A appliance. So again, I just need to stress that any work that's been done on an appliance, a Type A appliance that is a replacement part or a replacement component, can only be done by someone who is endorsed in Type A appliance servicing. And that means that if you work for an employer who might be licensed in the specialised class of Type A appliance service work, you also need to be registered in Type A appliance service work to carry out that work as well. Okay, but what that does mean too is that, and we do know that there's issues, and there's been some situation in industry where there have been people offering an opportunity to do carbon monoxide spillage tests on appliances. You certainly can't do that. The only people that can do carbon monoxide spillage testing on an appliance is someone who is on the initial install of the appliance, is the registered or licensed person who's done that installation, or from a service point of view, it is a person that is licensed or endorsed to carry out Type A appliance servicing. There is a situation where people can do an atmospheric carbon monoxide test of a space, but they cannot turn an appliance on and do a carbon monoxide spillage test unless they hold the current registration or license in the specialised class of Type A appliance servicing work for an already existing installed appliance itself. I hope that sort of clarifies some of that information. Also, too, it's important to note that when the plumbing regulations changed way back in 2008, that is where we had plumbers that would have held the class of gas fitting back then. There was a change in the regulations when the specialised class was introduced. Those people were grandfathered across to Type A appliance servicing work. So what that meant was that anyone who effectively has done training after 2008, maybe completed an apprenticeship, they would not automatically hold Type A appliance servicing work as an endorsement on their registration or license. The only way that you can be endorsed to do that work is to undertake the Cert 4 program in Type A appliance service work, complete the program itself, and pass the VBA's both theoretical and written assessment for that specialised class. So that leads us into a situation around compliance certificate. So again, understanding that most people on the call tonight will be aware of that if you are doing plumbing work and the value of that plumbing work for material and labour is greater than $750, that certainly does trigger a compliance certificate. I just want to clarify a little bit of information about what that does mean for people that are undertaking any type A service work. So what that also we will see some triggers that mean that you do need to supply a compliance certificate. So again, work that involves the installation, relocation or replacement of any gas appliance, yes, you certainly need to supply a compliance certificate in that situation. Work that involves the conversion of a gas appliance using a different fuel. So if you're doing conversion from LPG to natural gas or natural gas to LP, a compliance certificate needs to be lodged. But probably the kicker here for people that are doing type A appliance servicing work is that work that involves the installation, modification or relocation of consumer piping, other than that by the authority, triggers a compliance certificate. So what does that mean for people out there doing the work? Well, a couple of examples would be that if you do disconnect the gas appliance because that gas appliance is spilling carbon monoxide, that is a modification of the gas line. That does trigger a compliance certificate. If you're in a situation where you may need to install an isolation valve or replace an isolation valve, that is a modification of the gas line, and that again triggers a compliance certificate. If you're in a situation where you might be doing renovation work where you remove an appliance, cap it off, and then the appliance is replaced, again, it is deemed to be a modification of the gas fitting line, and you then need to lodge a compliance certificate. And of course, as we understand, within 5 days of completion, and pass that information on to both the VBA and the consumer. So there's information there around what we need to make sure that people are doing when we are doing this, this type of work, so that they don't get themselves caught out by not supplying the appropriate information in relation to the compliance certificates for the work that they are doing. So the next section we're going to talk about, and again, I appreciate we go through a lot of information that goes through fairly quickly. If you want to ask some questions, please do. There will be a recording of the session that will go up on ESV's website. So at your leisure, you can have a look and sort of go back and have a look at any information that you may not have sort of picked up on, or is any other information that you might want to know about. And again, like I say, if there are issues with anything that you might be aware of or you're unclear on, please ask a question or get in touch with us, and we'll certainly be able to help. So the ventilation is an important part of what we need to talk about when we're looking at atmospheric burners and gas appliances that are open fluid appliances or natural draft appliances themselves. So information sheet 58 speaks to a lot of the things that we need to look at there. So again, I'm just going to jump in and have a look and go over a couple of things that I believe are important that people need to be aware of. So a couple of things that we need to look at there, and I think are important, is certainly the air supply to the appliance itself and the quality of that air. So these are the things that we need to do, is to make sure that the appliance itself is in an appropriate space and there is enough oxygen or air in the space to allow that atmospheric burner to operate properly. So there's an area that we need to look at, and one is that in relation to the standards themselves. So when the 2013 standards were endorsed, what that meant is that the allowance for any gas appliance in a space, we had an allowance of 3 megajoules per hour per cubic metre of room space. So what that meant, of course, as an example, if an appliance was 30 megajoules per hour in relation to its operation, any room or any space smaller than 10 cubic metres would lead to additional ventilation needing to be installed. And of course, we'd go back to the AS5601, and back then it would have been either, looking at the area of the ventilation would have been either 300 by the megajoule rating of the appliance, or potentially 600 by the megajoule rating of the appliance, depending on how you were accessing that ventilation. After buildings that were approved on or after the date of the 31st of March 2014, that figure of 3 megajoules per hour per cubic metre has much reduced. And that's been brought right down to 0.4 megajoules per hour. And the reason for that is because we don't have as much advantageous air available to appliances to operate the atmospheric burner. And that is the reason why that is, of course, is that buildings are built in more sustainably now. They're built in such a way that we're trying to lock them up a little bit better when we look at the way that we no heat loss in relation to its insulation capabilities. So there has been a recognition that those appliances aren't necessarily getting as much air from the space that they're operating in So there's been a reduction in relation to what that looks like. So again, if we look at that same appliance, so a 30 megajoule per hour appliance in a space, in a building that was approved for construction after 31st of March 2014, we've gone from a space of 10 cubic metres where we would need ventilation. If it was smaller than that, it's up to 75 cubic metres. So we need to be able to understand how those calculations work and what we need to do to work out if any additional ventilation is required. Now, again, that ventilation is only ventilation to ensure that the atmospheric burner is going to operate properly and we are going to get complete combustion. And we need to make sure that we are getting complete combustion, because without complete combustion, that's when we have issues where there is potential carbon monoxide in the space itself as well. So it's really important that we understand that and we understand what the ventilation requirements are. Again, AS 5601 is the go-to document for all of that information there. Also, some other information that's important on this sheet is in relation to the adequacy of the air. Now, that would be to make sure that any ventilation or that we are allowing to be used for the burner to operate properly is not contaminated, or it's air that's not effectively going to, again, adversely affect the operation of the burner itself. So we just need to make sure that if we are putting in vents, or we are in a situation where we're trying to feed oxygen to the burner itself, that is good quality air. And the last piece in relation to this gas information sheet is around the adverse effect of air movement systems. And that's probably, again, a really important piece, because that is what happens when we see the potential of range hoods or exhaust fans. And if they do create a negative pressure in a space where we have an open flute appliance. Unfortunately, we certainly, and I'm sure everyone is fully aware, carbon monoxide being a poisonous, non-odorous, invisible gas is certainly very, very dangerous. But in the recent situations that we've seen where there's been, unfortunately, deaths due to this carbon monoxide, one of the critical factors has been that there has also been a negative pressure in the system as well, or in the space. Now, so what we need to make sure of there is that if we do come across areas where there is a negative pressure, we do need to add additional ventilation above the ventilation that we need for the burner to operate to overcome any negative pressure that might be in the space. And again, there's the great animations that ESV have on the website. Plus also there's a very good video that is housed on the VBO website as well that will take you through those processes to make sure that you can ascertain what the situation is. So that's what the information is, and we will speak to that a little bit more as we go through the negative pressure testing and the carbon monoxide spillage testing tonight as well. So what does that mean for us? So when we are undertaking these tests, and let's be, again, clear on this, that when you are either undertaking a service or you're commissioning appliances, the negative pressure test and the carbon monoxide spillage test are only parts of that either complete commissioning process or part of a complete service of an appliance. So there is 4 things that we're looking for here, of course: establishing the baseline conditions of the atmosphere at the particular time of the test that we're carrying out. We're looking at testing for negative pressure, testing for carbon monoxide spillage, and then we're assessing what we do find in relation to those tests and what outcomes we need to take. So gas information sheet 38 is the sheet that you can go to try to get a little bit more information about what it is that you need to do to undertake these tests appropriately. So again, we don't have a lot of time to go through all of this in greater detail, but the information is there and the animations and videos are available for you to go back and look at. So what does that mean? So in the first instance, we need to establish a baseline. So what we do there is we're looking to use a smoking device. We're using a smoking device, making sure that the appliance that we're testing at the particular time is turned off, making sure that the flue is cold. And in the first instance for the baseline test, we make sure that all the doors and windows are closed and any exhaust fan or range hood is also turned off. So we want to make sure that the appliance itself is in a sort of a fairly benign state, so it's not being affected by any other sort of additional influences. So what we do there is we just use a smoking device, hold that smoking device, whether it's a smoke match or a smoking pen, around the draft diverter of the appliance or potentially around the air intake, and we just inspect the flame itself and watch it for a couple of minutes to see how that smoke behaves. Now, if for some reason there's issues in relation to, it could be a windy day outside, there could be temperature differentials between the internal environment and the external environment, it just gives you an opportunity to, again, as it mentions, as a baseline or a point of reference to see how that smoke is potentially behaving. So what then allows us to do is go on and turn all of the exhaust fans on in the property itself, open up any doors that might lead to the appliance that you're servicing as well, just to make sure that the appliance can be disadvantaged as much as possible. So after a couple of minutes, maybe up to 5 minutes, if there is a negative pressure present, what will happen is that when you do, again, have your smoking device around the draft diverter or the air intake of the appliance itself, you will see if there's a negative pressure present, the smoke will actually be drawn towards those exhaust fans or range hoods. Okay, and that means that you can get an understanding from what the baseline smoke test was compared to the testing smoke under the negative pressure testing, and that will give you an indication of whether or not you might see a negative pressure in the space. Again, while we're doing this negative pressure test, we're making sure that the appliance is turned off and the flue is cold. We know that as the flue warms up, of course, it will naturally draft, and then we don't want that to be giving us any effectively wrong information about what the space is. So the appliance needs to be turned off, the flue needs to be cold. So like I say, what we'd like to see, of course, is that when you are undertaking this negative pressure test, is that the smoke does go straight up towards the ceiling or potentially enters the appliance and into the draft diverter itself. And if that's working or behaving, or the smoke's behaving exactly as it did when you did your baseline test, you can safely say that there is no negative pressure present. But unfortunately, like I say, is if that smoke starts to move towards an exhaust fan or a range hood or towards the center of the room, then we need to work out what we need to do to overcome that negative pressure. Now, what we do there is we start to open a window either adjacent to the appliance itself or potentially where the exhaust fans are, just to see how far we need to open that window. And we do it in stages. We open the window, we go back to the appliance, and we do the smoke test again. So over a period of time, what we will find is that smoke will start behaving the same way it did when we established the baseline. What we can do then, what we then can do is we can go and measure the opening of the window, and that will give us an indication of the size of the vent that needs to be installed in the wall to ensure that we can overcome that negative pressure. Now, that is fixed ventilation, and that is a permanent opening. It's not something that should be closed off. It's something that needs to be open all the time to ensure that that negative pressure doesn't disadvantage that appliance and then potentially be in a situation where it can draw carbon monoxide or products of incomplete combustion back into the space where the appliance is housed. Once we've done that and we've established that we know what size the vent needs to be, if it is indeed in a situation of negative pressure, make a note of what that size of the vent needs to be, close the window again, because when we do our carbon monoxide spillage test, we do want to make sure that that appliance again is as disadvantaged as possible. So that means we again close the windows, we keep the exhaust fans on, we keep the range hoods on. What we do is we get our analyzer, our carbon monoxide analyzer out, turn it on. We can take a couple of background readings just to make sure that if for any reason there could be some carbon monoxide in the room itself, that may be there because of the fact that you might be doing working in a property that's close to a busy roadway. It also could be that a situation where someone might have been doing some cooking fairly recently, and there may be some carbon monoxide present. So you do your baseline test. If you have an analyzer that can be Zen zeroed, you can zero the analyzer. Otherwise, what you do is you just indicate or make note of what that baseline carbon monoxide spillage reading is, and then you can start undertaking the carbon monoxide spillage test. So what we do there, of course, is we turn the appliance on, we turn the appliance on to full. Okay, so that way, what we're going to do there is we're going to wait the appropriate time. So for most type A appliances, that'll be a period of 5 minutes. For decorative gas log fires, type 1 decorative gas log fires, that's a period of 10 minutes. And if those appliances are installed in a chimney way, you can even allow an extra 5 minutes on top of that, just to make sure that the chimney does have an opportunity to warm up and draft naturally. So that's what we're looking for to undertake that carbon monoxide spillage test. And then the next piece, of course, is we assess what the outcome is. And we'll speak a little bit more about that as we move through the presentation. But this gas information sheet 38, there is information there that will help you and assist you in relation to all of these steps and what we would need to see happen when you're undertaking both the commissioning process for negative pressure and carbon monoxide spillage, and also when you are undertaking service work as well. As part of that, ESV, and they've listened when we've been doing these sessions over the last couple of years, lots of people, lots of plumbers have asked about, is there some sort of checklist available? There's something there that we can use just to make sure we're not missing components or steps in relation to both of these processes. So certainly ESV have listened. They have produced a negative pressure and a carbon monoxide spillage test report. Again, it's sitting on the Type A gasfitter toolkit page, freely available to download. Again, ESV are more than happy if you want to brand them with your own logos, but it does make sure that you can go through the process and make sure you're picking up every step to make sure that you're appropriately carrying out both that negative pressure and carbon monoxide spillage test. So again, it's freely available and downloadable. Certainly if you have your own, there's no problem there, but it is, if for anyone doesn't have one and you're doing this sort of work, it's there, and I would promote you to go and have a look at it, print it down and have a look and see if it might be something that might be useful for you and your business. So again, just to make sure that we're aware of this, is that when we are doing the carbon monoxide spillage tests, either waiting the 5 minutes or potentially the 10 minutes for the Type 1 decorative flame effect fires, we do not want to see an increase in carbon monoxide from our base reading. Okay, so what that means is if you're in a situation where you take a background reading and you zero your analyzer, if you get in any increase from that baseline, that means there is an issue that you need to work out what the problem is. Now, that problem could be due to the fact that the appliance itself is faulty, or it may be because of the fact that there is negative pressure in the space as well. So if you are in a situation where the appliance is emitting carbon monoxide, you do need to make sure you can understand why it's emitting that carbon monoxide. So what we would ask you to do, or what you do need to do in the first instance, is turn off the exhaust fans, turn off the range hoods, wait a couple of minutes, and then retest the appliance. Now, if you are retesting the appliance without the exhaust fans on, what that will show, or what they will indicate, is if it is the appliance itself that is faulty, or whether or not it was the carbon monoxide being drawn into the space was being drawn in due to negative pressure. So you do need to ascertain as to why that's happening, because that does make a difference as to what you do and how you take those next steps. So what do we find when we do these tests? So there's probably 4 main outcomes that we'll see. So what we will see is we'll see whether or not the appliance in the situation is not spilling carbon monoxide and there's no negative pressure. So of course that appliance is in a situation where it can be serviced, it can be brought back into water, and it can be used quite safely until its next service, hopefully within 2 years or around that 2-year time. I will say, though, it is important to understand that when we are doing a carbon monoxide spillage test, we do need to make sure that the appliance is operating at its appropriate burner pressure. So we do need to check the compliance plate. We do need to put a manometer on the appliance itself, and we do need to give it the best opportunity to be working safely. Now, that does mean you do an inspection of the appliance. You might need to just check to make sure that everything looks in a way that it should, so it's going to operate properly. So, unfortunately, in some situations, there's no real point doing a carbon monoxide spillage test if there isn't enough pressure to the appliance itself. So you do need to check that first. If for some reason you can't get the appropriate burner pressure to the appliance, there's potentially another problem that you need to fix before you can move forward to the next phase. We might also have situations where the appliance is not spilling carbon monoxide, but there is a negative pressure present. Now, again, we go back to that situation where we do need to make sure that there is ventilation is installed. But if the appliance is not spilling carbon monoxide directly, it doesn't make that situation an immediately unsafe situation, because the appliance itself is working adequately. What we do need to then make sure of is that there can be ventilation installed into that space as quickly as possible. Now, as a plumber or someone who's doing this type of service work, you may not have the means to install that ventilation directly. You do need to have a conversation with the consumer, and you do need to point out that the ventilation must go in, or the appliance will need to be isolated, because it is a non-compliant installation if the ventilation is inadequate. What you can do there is, if for some reason that the customer, or potentially if it's a tenant and you need to speak to a managing agent, you can have a conversation around what the, effectively the dangers of carbon monoxide and why it is so important, and why those vents need to go in. You can pass that information on to the VBA. So if you do pass that information on to the VBA about the fact that you have been to a residence, there is an appliance, it's not spilling carbon monoxide, but there is negative pressure, the VBA certainly can take action if need be, if the homeowner or the managing agent isn't in a position where they'll allow you to install that additional ventilation. And I think that is a part of a safeguard to make sure that you as the plumber are doing what you need to do and fulfilling your obligation under the Gas Safety Act that we work under. The next one that we would look at, of course, is that if the appliance is spilling carbon monoxide and there is no negative pressure. So what that means is that the appliance, if you can potentially fix any or repair the appliance, which might bring it back into service and back into line. Now, I think people should be aware, of course, is that you could get negative pressure. You could get carbon monoxide spillage because the appliance itself is being disadvantaged due to something like a blocked flueway. It could be disadvantaged because there could be blockages or damage to the burner, blockages in orifices by either the burner or the pilot. There could be flame impingement. There's a couple of reasons why the appliance itself might be effectively emitting carbon monoxide. Now, again, opportunity for you, someone with Type A appliance endorsement, if you can fix that problem and bring that appliance back into service and have it work safely, that's a fantastic outcome. Okay, so once that's back into service and there's no spillage of carbon monoxide, then the appliance is good to go again and then can be serviced again in sort of 2 years' time. If for some reason, though, there is a situation where the appliance is spilling carbon monoxide and you cannot fix the appliance does need to be isolated. So that isolation does mean, and again, I mentioned it will trigger a compliance certificate, but you can only, in this situation, you need to have the permission of the homeowner or potentially tenant or managing agent to isolate that appliance. So in the past, there have been practices where people have potentially cut thermocouples or even electrical leads to the appliances themselves. Now, we certainly cannot promote or condone that sort of activity. That is willful damage, and you can't really do that to someone else's appliance. So you do need to ask for that explicit permission to make sure that you can isolate it. Again, we'd like to think that if you have a conversation with anybody where there is an appliance spilling CO, that you can convince them due to its lethal danger that they will allow you and agree to having that appliance isolated. Now, again, if for some reason they won't allow you to do that, ESV have a 24-hour hotline that you can ring. You can lodge the details in relation to the situation, and ESV will take some carriage. I'll speak a little bit more about that when we move on to the next slide. The last one, of course, is that it could be a double the double hit where we do have appliance spilling carbon monoxide and negative pressure. So the two things that we need to do there, of course, is one, make the appliance safe by isolation. The other is to ensure that we can overcome any negative pressure by ensuring that we can get ventilation into the space. But in both situations where there is carbon monoxide spillage, what we need to do is isolate the appliance or take action where that appliances can be isolated. Now, again, when we look at that, we're investigating any possible causes of carbon monoxide spillage, rectify if we can, or isolate the appliance. Now, as I've mentioned, the 1-800-652-563 number, selecting 5 on the menu, allowing yourself to put in details of what you have found. In the main, what will happen there is ESV will contact you as the plumber on the job. They will speak to you about what it is that you might have found on that premises. They will then contact the homeowner or the managing agent. They will then ask them to allow you, the plumber, back to the premises to disconnect properly that appliance. Or if for some reason they again aren't satisfied with the behaviour or the outcome of those conversations, ESV will go to site and they will isolate at the meter. So they turn gas off to the whole building. Again, they're not wanting to do that and hoping that any plumber can have a conversation with someone to try to not get to that level. But ESV certainly will do that if it is the last resort and people aren't allowing you as the plumber to safely isolate that appliance if it's spilling CO. Again, I will mention that we do have that letter there that both ESV and the VBA have co-branded that allows you to pass information on to any homeowner, again, tenant or agent, as to what you might have found and why it is so important that we ensure that there is adequate ventilation for appliances and certainly the dangers of carbon monoxide. So that leads us to the next part of the conversation, which is around servicing work. Now, again, what Gas Information Sheet 59 allows us to do is take a little bit of a look at what it means to do a full and complete service of an appliance itself. So there's a couple of things, again, that ESV would like to see happen from a service point of view. So we'll have a look in relation to this inspection checklist. So there's a couple of things looking at inspecting the flue and the cowl to make sure they're both in good condition, making sure there is adequate ventilation. We've mentioned a little bit about gas information sheet 58 earlier tonight. Ensuring that the appliance itself is installed correctly, looking for any scorch marks, burn marks, any sort of damage to the appliance itself, just to make sure that you can visually check and inspect to see if the heater has been installed correctly and looks to be operating properly. And of course, then we look at carrying out that negative pressure test. When we come to the service of the appliance itself, so issues or things that we need to cover off on are things like ensuring that we can clean the fan, making sure we clean both the pilot and the main burner, clean all the dust out of the appliance itself, check all the safety switch operations, including the thermostats, thermocouples. If it's a ducted heater or a wall furnace, we're making sure we're checking the heat exchanger for any metal fatigue, checking the back wall, especially in situations where you might have a wall furnace. We're making sure we check the back wall of that wall furnace itself to see if there's any signs of heat stress or burn marks on the wall. There have been situations where some appliances have had issues with fractures or cracks in heat exchangers. Those appliances will either been repaired or replaced, but you do certainly still need to check for that. We're also wanting you to visually check and test components of the appliance for any fatigue or anything else in relation to the appliance, and conduct the carbon monoxide spillage test, leading through to checking any of the gas connections for gas tightness as well. So they're the things that we need to see, make sure that people are doing when they are carrying out a complete service of the appliance itself. So what that means, of course, if you are doing the work, and again, ESV have been listening to what people have been saying. So there is also a Type A appliance service report for gas heaters especially, that ESV have put together, so that you can again download from the Type A Gasfitter Toolkit page. Allows you to put all the information that you might have found around the service that you've undertaken, allows you to keep it as a record. It certainly allows you to pass it on to a consumer. Again, we're pushing, we would like everyone, again, making sure that consumers are fully aware that these appliances should be serviced every 2 years. And if we can keep providing this sort of paperwork, making sure that they understand what a good service looks like compared to just a clean of an appliance. We do want to make sure that people are getting them fully serviced, appropriately serviced, properly serviced, so that the appliances are back in good condition and everyone is safe while they're using these heaters and appliances in their home. So that brings us to the, probably one of the sort of topics around the evening, and it's a fairly hot topic at the moment if you are a plumber that is looking or doing work for real estate agents, and that is the gas safety check under the residential tenancies regulations. Now, I think people need to be aware that this residential tenancies regulation sits under the auspice of the Consumer Affairs Victoria. So it doesn't, apart from the fact that ESV look after the Gas Safety Act, this is coming out of Consumer Affairs Victoria. What that certainly means is that after the 29th of March of 2001, for every new agreement for a tenanted property. Now, that doesn't include Airbnbs and some other properties. We have information around boarding houses and rooming houses already, but this is specifically around rental agreements. What that does mean is that every 2 years, there needs to be a gas safety check on that property. Now, that gas safety check can only be carried out by someone who is endorsed in Type A appliance servicing, because it does include the servicing of the appliances in that built environment as well. So ESV, again, they have designed the Gasfitter Toolkit page that sits on the ESV website with information around what that looks like and how it is and what the things you need to do as part of that gas safety check. So again, there's a lot of good information here that you can read and have a look over, just to make sure that you understand what your obligation is when you are carrying out these reports. Now, what that certainly does mean is this gas safety check is the opportunity for you as a plumber to look at the whole of the gas installation and then send a report back to the managing agent about what you might have found in relation to any non-compliance or potentially unsafe situations with that gas installation. So we're looking to make sure that we can test the service line for soundness. So that means you're testing with appliances connected. We're looking at flues. We're looking at flue terminals, and we are carrying out a service of the appliance itself. Some things that we also would be looking at, and when we look at what it means for something to be non-compliant compared to immediately unsafe, an example of that would be potentially that if you're looking at a property where there's maybe some, whether it be Duopex or Gaspec type product, which is external to the property and in a situation where it might be around where there can be a direct sunlight can be impact on that pipe. Now that is a non-compliant situation, but it's certainly not an immediately unsafe situation. So in relation to this gas safety check, your obligation is to inform the real estate agent in what you have found in relation to that test and service those appliances. A situation where you might find where something is deemed to be immediately unsafe would be an example of something like a freestanding cooker, where that cooker has not been secured. Now, that's immediately unsafe because of the fact that if you open the door of that cooker and someone is to put weight on that, that cooker may topple over, or that could pull itself away from the wall or the connection to the gas line itself. So it's deemed immediately unsafe and action needs to be taken. Now, you might be in a position where you can permanently fix that situation straight away, or it might mean that you do a temporary fix. But the situation is immediately unsafe and something does need to be done about it. But so the information around that gas safety check sits here on the Gasfitter Toolkit page. That is available to you so you can see what it is that you need to do, and information around that record keeping process as well. So again, understanding that this being sort of a new sort of thing that's happened for industry, what we do see here is we have ESV getting onto the front foot and supplying information around this gas safety check and the checklist itself. So ESV have again come up with a gas safety checklist. This isn't a mandatory, you do not need to use this, it's not mandated, but ESV are just suggesting that it's something that will help you carry out these gas safety checks so you can then pass it on to the managing agent of a property, and hoping that everything else that you do there is going to be okay, and any repairs that need to be made can be made as sort of a preventative maintenance or ongoing maintenance of that property, and that the gas line is safe. So there's information here around all the different appliances, what you find, checking around the soundness of the gas line itself, talking about things like whether or not there's negative pressure available, and what fixes might need to be suggested so that we can bring that situation back into become a compliant installation, plus also a safe installation as well. So again, if you're not familiar or haven't seen this gas safety checklist, again, it's freely available on the website with ESV. You can download it, you can then print it out and pass it off to others as well. So one of the other things that I need to make people aware of, of course, is that ESV on their website do have some gas safety information that's there. These safety alerts are there for some of the open fluid appliances that you might find out in properties. Over the last couple of years, these appliances have been rechecked just to make sure and see how they work under negative pressure. For a lot of the appliances, there's a fix that you can get from the manufacturer themselves. Some of them, for some of the appliances, like the Pyrox heater, there is a deed of undertaking with the manufacturer that they will come to site and either repair or replace the appliance itself. Some of the others you might find that if the appliance has been already fixed, there will be a sticker indicating that the appliance has been fixed, and then you can then carry out the appropriate level of service. Also, some information around on the safety alerts. There's some information around the audit for the Rinnai energy savers, and there's some information around one of the Brivus components of one of the plastic components on a flue, where there's been a little bit of an issue with that as well. So what I again would encourage people, if they're working in the space of Type A appliance service work, to become familiar with the gas safety alerts or the alerts on the ESV website, just so you're aware of what it is that you might find in industry if you're carrying out the work itself. Okay, so we're about 55 minutes in. So what I'm going to do is Andrew Cialini, who is the building surveyor, chief building surveyor for VB8, he's going to say a few words. And then what I'm going to do is we're going to bring everyone back together. We're going to get the members of the panel back online, and then we'll go through some of the frequently asked questions for tonight's session and hopefully answer as many of those as possible.
Hello, I'm Andrew Cialini, State Building Surveyor at the Victorian Building Authority. Thank you for your participation in this year's gas safety webinar presented by Master Plumbers on behalf of the Victorian Building Authority and Energy Safe Victoria. Today's webinar focused on some of your responsibilities when carrying out gas fitting work, part of the government's Your Client, Your Responsibility campaign. We hope you found the webinar of benefit to your work. To quickly summarise today's content, we covered the range of information available on the VBA and ESV websites to help you carry out gas fitting work safely and competently. These resources include the ESB Type A appliance gas fitting toolkit. Master Plumbers reminded us of the legislative and regulatory requirements of the Gas Safety Act, the Gas Safety Gas Installation Regulations 2018, the Building Act 1993, and the Plumbing Regulations 2018. These documents form part of the regulatory framework for gas fitting work that gas fitters should be familiar with. Master Plumbers also went through your responsibilities when servicing gas appliances, the process of how to conduct a carbon monoxide spillage test and negative pressure tests, and the corrective measures to take based on the results of the tests. Today's presentation also covered what is required under a gas safety check, which is a requirement of the Residential Tenancies Regulations 2021. Landlords and real estate agents will be engaging gas fitters to carry out this work. You can use the free gas safety checklist available on the ESB website. All the resources covered in today's webinar are free for you to download from the VBA and ESB websites. And a recording of this webinar and the PowerPoint presentation will also be available there shortly. We strongly encourage you to make use of this to support your work. Once again, thank you for attending today's webinar. I hope you found it useful. As gas fitters, you play an essential role in keeping the community safe. Take care and stay safe.